So Magic the Gathering and all those computer games, they really killed off D&D and the rest of the role-playing game market. It did hang on as a fringe interest. There's a really good article that I'll link to, which is from about 2010, I think, and it really sort of it's speaking about things in the past tense. You know, it's like the death knell of D&D. So Wizards of the Coast ended up owning D&D, and they published their own version. By this time, it was a 3rd edition, probably more like the 5th or 6th edition, depending on how many you count. But they called it 3rd edition, then subsequently 3.5. The license was expanded into a number of successful video games, and this had been happening through the 80s. The Goldbox games, Pools of Radiance, various sort of Dragonlance-based games. Eventually, there was Baldurs Gate and Neverwinter Nights. Baldurs Gate, hours and hours worth of well-written stories to play through, very sort of atmospheric and immersive graphics. I mean, you know, Baldur's Gate is quite limited for the time because all the work's gone into the stuff behind the surface. But I've got a great affection for those graphics. I mean, it literally does look like you're looking down on a tabletop and playing with miniature figures. And with all that stuff, you know, there's like voice acting in there, there's special effects in there. Why would anyone need to sit at a table and roll dice and get people together and use their imagination anymore? You would think at this point we could consign D&D to the dustbin of history and think, well, yeah, so long and thanks for all the fish. But instead, something weird happened. So in the early 2000s, of course, Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings adaptations were released, and for many people, you know, we'd been waiting for it all our lives. You know, we'd read those books, we'd always imagined it, and then suddenly these books were brought to the screen, you know, like really beautifully and really made incredibly well. And you know, you can nitpick and you can find flaws in them, but I think that they're the best adaptations of those books that, you know, we could have ever hoped for. And I think they did an amazing thing, which I thought, you know, when I first saw Fellowship of the Ring, I thought, well, that was fantastic, but I don't think it's going to be a big hit because I don't think it's got the common touch. I think it's amazing for people who read the books, and it's amazing for nerds who love dragons and dwarves and shit. But mainstream audiences are not going to get into that. And how wrong I was. I mean, I'm always wrong about these things. Mainstream audiences wouldn't touch a book about dwarves and orcs with a 10-foot pole. They absolutely loved it. It was something totally new and unique. It was something that had never been done in cinema before. You know, it had been touched on films like Dragon Slayer, but to see this world so well realised, you know, it changed the game really. And in addition, round about the same time, the Harry Potter book series was being published, and again, people would never even think about reading books about wizards and dragons. You know, totally got into them. It became a huge part of popular culture, and obviously only helped by their subsequent movie adaptations. It gave children and adults a gateway into this world of magic and imagination and mild teenage angst. So obviously, you know, with the kind of developments in technology in cinema, we were starting to see superheroes, and like real superheroes that look like they do in comics, and, you know, science fiction where there's almost no limits to, you know, what you can put on screen. And suddenly, you know, all the kind of geeky stuff, all the nerdy stuff that had always sort of been, you know, bubbling under but seen as a sort of niche interest, it became the mainstream. You know, people were actually talking about it as being cool, you know. In the late 2000s, Wizards of the Coast released a 4th edition of D&D. There's a massive marketing push to get it to a new audience and capitalise on the success of similar fare. And, you know, it was influenced by things like World of Warcraft as well. I mean, a lot of people don't like 4th edition D&D. I think there's good stuff in it. I mean, I only played it twice, so I can't really comment. I'm not too familiar with it. I think it was very rulesy, and I think it was influenced by video games, and I think one of the intentions was let's make a game that's easy to play online. A lot of people sort of fell out with it, really. But I think the interesting thing was many lapsed gamers were inspired to reconnect with tabletop role-playing games at this point, and it wasn't just nostalgia and aging nerds such as myself. I mean, one of the reasons I got back into it was the guys at Penny Arcade started doing Acquisitions Incorporated, and me and a friend were listening to those podcasts, and my friend said, I can't believe I've never done a role-playing game. So we all decided to get together and play, and that's when we played 4th edition. Only played it a couple of times though. But nerd stuff in general was so much more visible. So I've said it a million times before, but when I first got into D&D, I read about it, but I didn't really know how it was played, and I couldn't really imagine it, you know. Until you actually play, it's a difficult thing to describe adequately. Of course, now it's completely different because you can go on YouTube and you watch people playing. You can go on Twitch and you can watch people playing. I mean, there's a video of freaking Vin Diesel playing D&D. You know, obviously Critical Role, as well as Acquisitions Incorporated. I think they've been the two things that have really kind of kicked it off into high gear. And obviously, Wizards of Coast now produce the 5th edition of the game. It's actually like the 7th or the 11th, depending on which ones you count and which ones you consider to be different editions. But it's called 5th edition, so we'll call it 5th edition. And that's a lot more story-based and a lot more sort of forgiving than 4th edition and 3rd edition, so it's easier to get into. It just doesn't seem mysterious anymore. It doesn't seem cultish anymore. You know, you don't have to kind of find a bunch of people to learn about it. You can just go online. Game of Thrones is one of the most mainstream, franchises out there. When I was at school reading books about dragons and wizards, you were considered to be a bit weird. Now, if you don't watch Game of Thrones, you're considered to be a bit weird. It's completely flipped the other way around, I think, as I say, it isn't just old people like myself playing these games. There's a lot of younger people getting into it. And I wonder if there is a sort of hipster element to it, like the gaming equivalent of only listening to music on vinyl. It's fair to say, you've got the amazing graphics on something like Skyrim. You're always going to be limited to what you can do in that game. And it's almost like people have seen the most advanced technology and then they just want to try something else. They want to try the old way of doing things. And, whenever you read about role-playing games, people will use the phrase collaborative storytelling, and they'll liken it to improvisational theatre. And it's a creative exercise, an art form in its own right. And no one talked like that in the 80s. It was just a cool game you could play about wizards, But however you get into these games, and even if it's just watching other people play online, you're into it. You're a fan. This is an article from Vice from 2014. I've got a couple of issues with this title. First of all, no, it isn't. And second of all, it wasn't in the first place. But I see what they're getting at. It's no longer considered to be a particularly tragic thing to be doing. Back in the 80s and the 70s, sitting in a basement with a couple of people around a table, that was considered to be the most antisocial thing you can do. But like now, in this day and age, like in your workplace, you only really communicate with people by email, and you can play online gaming, but you don't really see them, you don't really interact with them. There's something really, really social about getting together with people, looking into their eyes and seeing the body language and having a laugh. I mean, so much of it is just about having a laugh, having a drink, listening to some tunes and rolling some dice and making shit up, really.